The sheriff handed me an eviction notice for my road. "Ma'am says you're trespassing every time you drive to your cabin," he shrugged apologetically. "HOA claims that dirt road belongs to them now." I looked at the paper, then at the chain blocking my family's 30-year path home. The metal links were still warm from the morning sun, and I could smell fresh concrete from the new barriers. Behind them, my grandfather's cabin sat like a hostage. "Sheriff," I said, pointing across Willow Creek, "see that bridge?" 200 yards away, the morning commute was starting. Mercedes after BMW after Tesla, all crossing the wooden span my grandfather built in 1923. Every single car from the Pristine Meadows development heading to their important jobs in the city. "That's my bridge. Wonder how they'll feel about swimming to work." His eyes went wide as the math clicked. "Ever been trapped by your own neighbors? What state are you watching from? Drop your HOA horror stories." My name is Rex Donovan, and 3 months ago I thought my biggest problem was whether to use night crawlers or spinners for trout fishing. Boy, was I wrong. 52 years old, retired Army Corps of Engineers after spending 25 years building bridges in places where people kept trying to blow them up. I inherited my grandfather's 40-acre slice of paradise when he passed, cabin overlooking Willow Creek, enough timber to build a small town, and one very important piece of infrastructure that nobody bothered to put on any official maps. Grandpa Joe's Bridge, built in 1923 with hand-hewn cedar beams and the kind of craftsmanship that laughs at modern building codes. Every morning, the smell of aged timber mixed with creek mist would drift through my coffee steam as I watched the sun paint the mountains gold. The sound of water flowing over smooth stones below was better than any meditation app these city folks pay for. For 30 years, life was simple. Drive across the bridge, reach my cabin, fish until my problems felt manageable. The crunch of gravel under my truck tires was the only alarm clock I needed. Then some genius developer discovered they could build luxury homes without luxury infrastructure costs. Pristine Meadows, and yes, that's the actual name, because apparently irony is dead. 200 McMansions crammed onto what used to be peaceful ranch land, each one priced like a Manhattan penthouse. The marketing promised rustic luxury living, which translated to charging $800 grand for the privilege of complaining about actual rural life. Here's the beautiful part. The developer saved a fortune by not building his own bridge. Why spend money on infrastructure when some old veteran already maintains perfect creek access? Just assume he'll keep doing it forever, right? Enter our villain, Cordelia Whitmore. Picture every HOA horror story you've ever heard, then add law school and a superiority complex. 45 years old, moved from Seattle to escape urban problems while importing every bit of her entitled attitude. She drives a white BMW that gets detailed twice weekly. You can actually smell the Armor All from 50 feet away. The woman treats everyone in service jobs like they personally disappointed her mother at some charity gala. Cordelia got elected HOA president 6 months after moving in, running on maintaining community standards. What she really meant was making everyone's life miserable until the neighborhood matched her Pinterest fantasies. Her first move? Forming committees, architectural review committee to nitpick paint colors, landscaping standards committee to measure grass height with actual rulers, community improvement committee to find new things to ban, each staffed by people who moved to Montana specifically to avoid neighbors, then immediately started micromanaging everyone else's property. The complaints started innocently. Could I maybe not run my chainsaw on Saturday mornings? Were my solar panels really aesthetically appropriate? Would I consider painting my cabin something more community-friendly than weathered brown? I made the fatal mistake of ignoring them. That's when Cordelia's law degree kicked into overdrive. She discovered the original developer had promised residents a community bridge within 5 years of groundbreaking. That deadline passed 18 months ago, but the developer had conveniently gone bankrupt after finishing the houses. No bridge, no backup plan, no problem. They'd just commandeer mine. But first, my bridge needed to meet their standards. Fresh paint, decorative railings, weight limit signage requiring expensive engineering certification. The works. All at my expense naturally, for the privilege of continuing to provide free infrastructure to people who'd never bothered learning my name. When I ignored their 90-day ultimatum, Cordelia played her trump card. If I wouldn't upgrade their bridge, maybe I didn't deserve road access to my own property. That's how I learned that some people mistake kindness for weakness. They were about to discover the difference. The harassment started exactly 1 week after they chained my road. Tuesday morning, I'm sitting on my porch with coffee, watching the daily parade of luxury cars cross my bridge like nothing happened. The irony was thick as morning fog. They'd trapped me on my property while cheerfully using my infrastructure for their commute. The rhythmic rumble of expensive German engineering over century-old timber had become my new alarm clock. That's when Cordelia showed up with reinforcements. She parked her pristine BMW at the bridge entrance and climbed out carrying a clipboard, measuring tape, and a nervous-looking guy with a professional camera. The woman was dressed for a corporate takeover. Blazer, pencil skirt, heels that clicked against weathered planks like a countdown timer. Her perfume arrived 30 seconds before she did, some designer scent that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Mr. Donovan," she called, marching across my bridge like she owned it. "We need to discuss immediate safety concerns." I stayed in my chair, savoring my coffee and the morning show. Beautiful day for trespassing, Cordelia. She ignored that, unfurling her measuring tape with courtroom drama. "This structure is clearly substandard. Look at these railings, barely 3 feet high. County code requires 3.5 feet minimum. Years ago, I'd learned that when civilians start quoting building codes, they usually know just enough to be dangerous. During my Army days, I'd seen second lieutenants do the same thing with field manuals. Memorize one regulation and assume they understood the entire system. "That's for public bridges," I said calmly. "This is private property." "Used by the public," she snapped, while her photographer documented every nail and beam like he was gathering evidence for war crimes. "Which makes you liable for accidents. Do you have insurance for 200 families crossing daily?" The woman had clearly done her homework. Wrong homework, but homework nonetheless. She rattled off a list of violations: no lighting, no reflective markers, no weight limit signage, insufficient accessibility features. Her voice carried the confidence of someone who'd never actually built anything but assumed legal knowledge trumped engineering experience. That's when the solution hit me like inspiration often does. Simple, obvious, and absolutely perfect. I stood up, walked to my truck, and pulled out my camera. If she wanted documentation, we'd document everything. "You know what, Cordelia? You're absolutely right." I started photographing her photographer, which seemed to break his concentration. "This bridge definitely needs a complete safety evaluation. Better shut it down until we can get proper engineering assessments." The transformation was instant. Her face went from smug satisfaction to pure panic, faster than a trout hitting a fly. "Shut it down? You can't close the bridge." "Ma'am, if it's as dangerous as you claim, wouldn't closing it be the responsible thing to do? Can't have 200 families risking their lives on substandard infrastructure?" I continued photographing while she backpedaled. The telephoto lens that had looked so intimidating aimed at my property suddenly felt much less powerful when pointed back at them. "Now wait just a minute," she sputtered. "I didn't say it was immediately dangerous, but you documented safety violations and liability concerns. As the property owner, I have a duty to protect public safety. Better safe than sorry." This is where my engineering background came in handy. I walked to my shed and returned with a stack of official-looking forms. Actually just old permit applications I'd saved, but they looked impressive. Started filling them out with the serious attention of someone following proper protocols. "What are those?" she demanded, her voice climbing an octave. "Emergency closure paperwork, bridge inspection requests, liability assessments, engineering evaluations. Could take weeks to process. Maybe months during hunting season when the county inspector gets busy." You could watch the math happening behind her eyes. 200 homeowners, one bridge, no alternate route that didn't add 45 minutes to every trip. Her property values, her HOA authority, her entire power structure, all balanced on my grandfather's supposedly substandard bridge. "Perhaps I was hasty in my assessment," she said quickly. "The bridge seems adequate for current needs." "Oh no," I continued writing. "You've raised serious safety concerns. Can't ignore those. What if someone gets hurt and discovers the HOA president identified hazards but failed to act? That's textbook negligence." Her photographer had stopped shooting and was edging toward the car like a smart man sensing trouble. "Mr. Donovan, let's be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. You identified violations. I'm addressing them through proper channels, with official engineering evaluations, just like you recommended." The county inspector who showed up the next day took one look at my bridge and laughed. "Whoever complained doesn't know bridge construction from barn raising," he said. "This thing's built better than half our county infrastructure. Mind if I bring some students out? They should see what real craftsmanship looks like. Sometimes the best defense is letting your opponent defeat themselves." Cordelia didn't take humiliation well. Within 48 hours of the inspector's visit, she launched what I can only describe as a full-scale character assassination campaign. If she couldn't attack my bridge, she'd attack me personally. It started with whispered conversations at the country club. I heard about it from Buck Morrison, my contractor buddy, who occasionally did work for the development. "They're saying you're unstable," he told me over beers at Murphy's Tavern, the smell of grilled burgers mixing with his disbelief. PTSD, dangerous vet, the whole 9 yards. Cordelia's telling anyone who'll listen that you threatened her with violence. That was a flat-out lie, but lies travel faster than truth in small communities. Next came the paperwork blitz. Noise complaints filed every time I started my chainsaw, which, for the record, was always during legal daytime hours. Environmental violation reports claiming I was disrupting wildlife habitats by maintaining my own property. Zoning complaints about my solar panels being visually intrusive in a natural setting. Each complaint required me to take time off, meet with county officials, provide documentation, prove my innocence. Death by 1,000 bureaucratic cuts. The familiar smell of stale county office coffee and the scratch of pens on violation forms became my unwelcome routine. But Cordelia's masterpiece was the emergency HOA meeting she called to discuss community safety concerns regarding bridge access. I wasn't invited naturally, but word travels fast in rural Montana, especially when you've got friends like Rita Rowan, the accountant who lived in the development but thought the HOA board had lost their collective minds. She slipped me the meeting notes along with her own commentary scrawled in the margins. This woman is certifiably nuts. According to Rita's intel, Cordelia had presented a PowerPoint titled Infrastructure Crisis Management. She'd hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. Turns out 25 years of military service and clean living doesn't provide much ammunition. She'd consulted with 3 different attorneys about forcing me to sell through eminent domain. She'd even contacted the state transportation department about declaring my bridge critical infrastructure, requiring public oversight. The woman was hemorrhaging money on this vendetta. That's when I decided to remind her exactly who held the real power in this relationship. I printed up laminated signs. Private bridge, toll required, $5 exact change only. Set up a folding chair and a coffee can right at the bridge entrance. If they wanted to treat my bridge like a public utility, I'd start charging like one. The first morning was pure entertainment. I showed up at 6 a.m. with my thermos and camp chair, positioned myself where every commuter had to stop and pay. The early risers were so shocked they just handed over $5 bills without argument. The metallic jingle of coins hitting the bottom of my coffee can became the sweetest sound in Montana. By 7 a.m., word had spread through the development like wildfire. Cars backed up for half a mile, everyone trying to figure out what the hell was happening. The symphony of frustrated horns echoing off the Creek Canyon was better than any revenge movie soundtrack. Some people tried arguing. "This is ridiculous! You can't charge us. I'll call the police." I just pointed to my perfectly legal signage and held out the coffee can. Private property, private bridge, private toll, don't like it. County road 20 miles south will get you where you're going. The beauty was in the math. Most residents could pay $5 or add 90 minutes to their commute. Economics won every time. Cordelia arrived around 8 a.m., face red enough to stop traffic. She slammed her car door with enough force to crack pavement, then marched toward me in heels that punched angry little holes in the bridge planking with each step. "This is extortion," she screamed loud enough to wake hibernating bears. "No, ma'am, this is capitalism. Private service, market rate pricing. You want socialized infrastructure. Should have built your own bridge. I'll have you arrested." "For what? Operating a private toll bridge on private property? Sheriff's already been by. Said it's perfectly legal as long as I post clear signage and don't block emergency vehicles. That last part was my insurance policy. Fire trucks, ambulances, police, they all crossed free. I wasn't trying to hurt innocent people, just make a point about respect and property rights." The system worked beautifully for 3 days. I collected over $800 while residents learned valuable lessons about taking infrastructure for granted. Some even started saying good morning, treating me like a human being instead of an obstacle. Then, Friday night, someone cut the support cables on the south side of my bridge. Professional job. Clean cuts designed to weaken structure without immediate collapse. The kind of sabotage meant to force emergency closure during rush hour. My security cameras caught everything. Masked figure in expensive hiking gear, working by moonlight with bolt cutters that probably cost more than most people's truck payments. Sunday morning, I was back in my chair, bridge repaired and stronger than before. When Cordelia drove up, I made sure to compliment her on that distinctive Rolex, the same one clearly visible in my security footage. The way her hands started shaking told me everything I needed to know. The vandalism was just the opening move. Monday morning brought something I hadn't expected: sympathy. Rita Rowan knocked on my door carrying a steaming casserole dish and wearing the expression of someone delivering bad news. "Rex, you need to know what happened at last night's emergency board meeting," she said, setting the dish on my kitchen table. The smell of her famous tuna noodle casserole filled the room, but her worried face told me this wasn't a social call. "Cordelia's lost her damn mind. She's convinced half the board that you're a dangerous extremist who's going to start picking off residents with a hunting rifle. She actually used the words domestic terrorist." I poured coffee while Rita explained how Cordelia had presented my toll booth as evidence of escalating antisocial behavior, how she'd hired a private security firm to monitor the bridge situation, how she'd contacted the FBI about potential threats to the community. "The woman's spending HOA money like it's water," Rita continued. "But here's the thing. She got 3 board members to vote for something called emergency infrastructure acquisition. They're planning to force you to sell." That got my attention. "How?" "Eminent domain. She's trying to get the county to declare your bridge essential infrastructure and seize it for public use." I'd dealt with eminent domain before, during highway projects in the Army. It's a powerful tool, but it requires proving public necessity and following strict legal procedures. In rural Montana, for a bridge that had been private property for a century, that was a hell of a long shot. But it told me something important. Cordelia was desperate enough to risk everything. Tuesday brought the first sign of her new strategy. A certified letter from Hendricks, Stone & Associates demanding I cease toll collection within 48 hours or face immediate legal action for operating an unlicensed commercial enterprise. I called my attorney, Maggie Sullivan, a local girl who'd made good in law school but came home to practice because she missed the mountains. Her laugh when I read the letter was worth the consultation fee. "Rex, they're bluffing with a pair of twos. You can charge tolls on private property until the cows come home. This letter isn't worth the paper it's printed on." But Wednesday brought something that wiped the smile off my face. I was checking my bridge supports when I noticed fresh damage to the wooden pilings, deliberate gouges that weakened the load-bearing capacity. Someone had taken a chainsaw to the underwater supports, cutting deep enough to compromise structural integrity, but not enough to cause immediate collapse. This wasn't vandalism anymore. This was attempted murder. The cuts were positioned to fail during maximum load, morning rush hour, when the bridge carried the most traffic. If those supports gave way with cars crossing, people would die. And guess who'd be blamed for the unsafe structure? I spent the entire day underwater in waders, reinforcing every damaged support with steel brackets and concrete anchors. The creek water was cold enough to numb my hands, but anger kept me warm. By evening, the bridge was stronger than ever, but the message was clear. Cordelia had crossed a line from harassment to something much darker. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat on my porch with night vision binoculars and a thermos of coffee, watching for movement. Around 2 a.m., I got lucky. 2 figures in dark clothing approached my bridge from the downstream side, moving carefully through the shadows. They carried what looked like cutting tools and approached the new support brackets I'd installed. The distinctive click of expensive hiking boots on wet rocks carried clearly in the still air. I let them get close enough to start working, then hit them with my spotlight. "Evening, folks. Beautiful night for infrastructure terrorism." They ran like startled deer, but not before I got a clear look at both faces. One I didn't recognize, probably hired muscle. The other was someone I knew well. Thursday morning, I called Sheriff Morrison with my security footage and eyewitness testimony. What I told him made his coffee mug stop halfway to his mouth. "You're sure it was her?" "Clear as daylight. Cordelia Whitmore, HOA president, attempting to destroy private property in a way that could kill innocent people." The sheriff was quiet for a long moment. "Rex, this changes everything. We're not talking about civil disputes anymore. This is criminal. What do you need from me? Keep documenting everything. Don't confront her directly. Let us handle this through proper channels." He paused. "And Rex, maybe vary your routine for a while. Someone willing to sabotage a bridge might try more direct methods." That afternoon, I installed motion-activated floodlights around my entire property and upgraded my security system. If Cordelia wanted to escalate to attempted homicide, I'd make sure every move was recorded in high definition. Some people mistake patience for weakness. They were about to learn the difference between a strategic retreat and a tactical withdrawal. The phone call that changed everything came at 6:47 a.m. on a Thursday. "Rex, get down here now. Don't talk to anyone, don't call anyone, just come." Maggie Sullivan's voice had the tight control of someone trying not to scream with excitement. Her law office smelled like burnt coffee and desperation when I arrived 20 minutes later. Maggie looked like she'd been up all night, papers scattered everywhere, laptop glowing, and the manic expression of a prospector who'd just struck gold. "Tell me you didn't break any laws getting this information," I said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Didn't have to. Sometimes criminals are stupid enough to leave their evidence in public filings." She turned her laptop toward me. "Remember how Cordelia keeps threatening eminent domain? That got me thinking, where's an HOA getting money for this kind of legal war?" The screen showed bank documents that made my stomach drop. A construction loan for $2.3 million dated 18 months ago with Willow Creek Bridge construction listed as the primary purpose. "They borrowed money to build their own bridge," I said slowly. "Exactly. The bank required detailed engineering plans, construction timelines, the works. The loan was specifically secured against property values throughout pristine meadows." Maggie pulled up another document, her finger tracing a signature that made everything click. "And guess who personally guaranteed this loan with her Seattle properties as additional collateral?" Cordelia Whitmore's name stared back at me in black ink. "Here's the beautiful part," Maggie continued, scrolling through expense reports. "I requested HOA financial records through public disclosure laws. Want to see where that $2.3 million actually went?" The spreadsheet was breathtaking in its audacity. $400,000 for clubhouse enhancements, which included a wine cellar that cost more than most people's cars. $200,000 in consulting fees paid to companies owned by board members' relatives. $300,000 for landscape architecture that looked suspiciously like personal garden makeovers for board members' homes. "How much went to bridge construction?" I asked, though the silence already gave me the answer. "Zero. Not one goddamn penny." The room felt like it was spinning. "So when our dispute affects property values?" "The bank can call the entire loan if home values drop 15% or more, which means mass foreclosure. 200 families lose their homes, and Cordelia loses everything she owns in Seattle." I leaned back, understanding flooding through me like ice water. That's why she escalated to sabotage. "Rex, she's not fighting about bridge tolls or property rights. She's fighting for her financial life. If this dispute continues, if negative publicity spreads, if property values drop even slightly, she faces personal bankruptcy and potential fraud charges." The implications hit me like a freight train. Every desperate move Cordelia had made, the harassment, the sabotage, the attempted bridge destruction, suddenly made perfect sense. She wasn't protecting the community. She was protecting herself from prison. "What happens if we expose this?" Maggie's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. 200 innocent families discover their HOA president stole their infrastructure money and put their homes at risk. Cordelia faces federal fraud charges. The community implodes. And if we don't? She keeps escalating until someone gets hurt, because right now you're the only thing standing between her and complete financial ruin. Through the office window, I could see my bridge spanning the creek, cars crossing like they did every morning. Each vehicle carried someone who had no idea their home was balanced on a foundation of lies and embezzled money. "Maggie," I said quietly, "what's the difference between justice and revenge?" "About $2.3 million, she replied. "The question is, what kind of man are you? Time to find out. I chose justice. But justice, I learned, requires an army." That evening, Murphy's Tavern smelled like grilled burgers and revolution. I'd called the meeting for 6 p.m., figuring the after-work crowd would provide good cover for what was essentially a conspiracy to take down the most powerful person in the county. Maggie arrived first, lugging a banker's box that clinked with the sound of justice in manila folders. Buck Morrison showed up still wearing his tool belt, sawdust in his hair, and the satisfied look of someone who'd spent the day building something that would last. Rita Rowan came in, clutching her laptop like it contained nuclear codes, which, considering the financial bombshells she'd uncovered, wasn't far from wrong. The surprise guest changed everything. Father Miguel Santos, 68 years old, built like he'd wrestled bears for fun, carrying the kind of moral authority you can't buy or fake. When Father Miguel took a side in local disputes, the community listened. His presence meant this wasn't just about my bridge anymore. It was about the soul of pristine meadows. "Rex," he said, settling into our booth with coffee black enough to strip paint, "Rita tells me we're dealing with more than neighborhood politics here." I spread out everything we'd discovered, The stolen $2.3 million, Cordelia's personal guarantees, fraud disguised as community improvement. Father Miguel listened without interrupting, his weathered face growing darker with each revelation. 200 families, he said finally, the weight of pastoral responsibility heavy in his voice. Good people who trusted their leaders to protect them. That's why we're here, I said. We need a plan that saves the innocent and punishes the guilty. And we need it fast, Rita added, pulling up her laptop screen. I've been tracking HOA spending patterns. Cordelia's burning through their remaining funds trying to destroy Rex. At current rate, they'll be bankrupt in 6 weeks. Buck leaned forward, his contractor's mind cutting through the complexity. So we're racing against time. Either we fix this before she spends everything or the whole community goes down with her. Maggie opened her legal box, revealing documents organized with prosecutor-level precision. Here's what we've got. Clear evidence of fraud, conspiracy, and misappropriation of funds. Enough to put Cordelia away for 10 years if we present it right. But presenting it wrong destroys 200 innocent families, Father Miguel observed. We need surgical precision, not nuclear weapons. That's when Rita revealed her masterpiece, a 3-phase plan that would have impressed military strategists. Phase 1, she explained, turning her laptop so we could all see the flowchart. We approach the reasonable residents privately, people like Tom Bradley, the retired teacher, and Sarah Martinez, the nurse. Community leaders who aren't on Cordelia's payroll. We show them the evidence, get them organized. Phase 2, Maggie continued, we present Cordelia with an ultimatum. Accept our bridge sharing agreement and resign quietly, or face full criminal prosecution and community exposure. Give her 72 hours to decide. Buck grinned like a man who'd found the perfect tool for a difficult job. Phase 3. If she chooses wrong, we hold the most educational county meeting this town's ever seen, complete with financial records, audio recordings, and a PowerPoint that'll make her wish she'd never heard of Montana. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. We weren't trying to destroy anyone, we were offering choices and consequences. Cordelia could save herself and the community by doing the right thing, or she could face justice the hard way. What about practical details? I asked. Bridge operations, community relations, long-term solutions? That's where Buck's contractor experience became invaluable. Actual cost to build a proper community bridge, $180,000. I can have construction started within 30 days if they want their own infrastructure. Bridge sharing agreement cost $200 per month maintenance fee, I added. About $1 per household per month, less than their cable bills. Father Miguel nodded approvingly. Reasonable solutions that protect everyone's dignity. That's how communities heal. Rita had been taking notes, and now she looked up with the expression of someone who'd just solved a particularly complex equation. I've been thinking about the legal precedent this could set. When HOA boards misappropriate funds, residents usually have no recourse. But if we document everything properly, we could create a template for other communities facing similar fraud. You mean turn this into a case study? Maggie asked, her lawyer instincts engaging. Exactly. Rex's situation could help thousands of people nationwide who are dealing with corrupt HOAs. Document the process, share the legal strategies, create resources for property owners fighting similar battles. The room went quiet as we absorbed the implications. We weren't just fighting for my bridge or their community. We were potentially creating tools that could help people everywhere stand up to petty tyrants and financial fraud. Gentlemen, Father Miguel said, raising his coffee cup. Ladies, I believe we're about to do something important. Outside the tavern windows, the sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky the color of justice. Tomorrow, we'd find out what Cordelia was made of, and whether a community built on lies could choose to rebuild itself on truth. Cordelia's response to our ultimatum was swift, expensive, and absolutely insane. Monday morning, I woke up to the rumble of diesel engines and the crackle of radio chatter. Through my bedroom window, I could see 3 black SUVs parked at my bridge entrance, each containing men in tactical gear who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else than babysitting a rural property dispute. Private security, the team leader explained when I approached with my morning coffee. His name tag read Hendricks, and he had the uncomfortable expression of someone being paid to do something stupid, hired to monitor bridge safety and document any threatening behavior. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me. These mercenaries had to cross my bridge and pay my toll to reach their surveillance position. I wondered if Cordelia had explained that part when she hired them at $300 per hour. You boys planning to pay the $5 toll? I asked innocently. Hendrix's partner, a younger guy with nervous energy, actually reached for his wallet before Hendrix stopped him. We're not paying tolls. This is official security business. Then you're trespassing on private property, I said cheerfully, pulling out my phone to record. But since you're here, mind if I document your official security activities for my lawyer? By Tuesday, word about the armed guards had spread through the community faster than gossip at a church social. Rita called with updates from inside Pristine Meadows. Half the residents were furious about HOA money being spent on mercenaries, while the other half were terrified that their bridge dispute had escalated to military contractors. People are asking questions, Rita reported. Where's the money coming from? Why does a toll booth require armed response? Cordelia's losing support fast. Wednesday brought Sheriff Morrison to my door, looking like he'd been dragged into something he didn't understand. The morning mist clung to his uniform as he delivered news that confirmed everything we'd suspected about Cordelia's mental state. Rex, I need to ask about some allegations. Someone filed a complaint claiming you've been making terrorist threats against the community. I poured him coffee and showed him my security footage from the past week. Sheriff, the only threats around here are coming from those boys in tactical gear who keep asking neighbors about my anti-government activities. He watched the recordings with growing disgust. Jesus, Rex. Private military contractors for a bridge toll? What's next? Calling in the National Guard? Sheriff, I said, serious now. This woman's spending community money like she's preparing for war. That tells me she's either completely lost touch with reality or hiding something big enough to justify this expense. Thursday brought the most desperate move yet. Cordelia filed for an emergency restraining order claiming my toll booth constituted economic terrorism and posed imminent danger to community welfare. The hearing was scheduled for Friday afternoon, the same day as our community meeting. Maggie called it pure legal harassment. She's trying to get you arrested before you can present evidence. Classic desperate defendant behavior. But Thursday evening revealed just how far Cordelia had fallen into financial panic. I was doing my evening bridge inspection when I noticed fresh tire tracks in the mud below the supports. Expensive, all-terrain tires that belonged to vehicles way above my neighbor's pay grade. Someone had been accessing my bridge from underneath, during daylight hours when the security team should have been watching. Following the tracks led to something that made my blood run cold. Professionally placed explosive charges on the main support beams. Not enough to kill anyone. The charges were designed to create dramatic structural failure during low traffic periods, but enough to completely destroy my bridge and eliminate the evidence of everything that had happened. This wasn't amateur sabotage anymore. This was professional demolition designed to look like structural collapse. I called Sheriff Morrison immediately. Sheriff, she's moved to actual infrastructure destruction. I've got explosive charges on my bridge supports. Are you certain? 25 years military engineering, Sheriff. I know demolition when I see it. Someone spent serious money on this setup. The bomb squad from the county seat arrived within an hour, their floodlights turning my peaceful creek into a crime scene. What they found confirmed my worst fears. Military-grade explosives, professional placement, timing devices set for Friday morning rush hour. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing, the explosives expert told Sheriff Morrison. This wasn't meant to hurt people. It was meant to eliminate evidence and destroy property during maximum media impact. Friday morning, Cordelia made her final desperate play. She appeared at my temporary bridge checkpoint with a briefcase, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip the handle. The morning sun revealed stress lines that makeup couldn't hide, and the hollow stare of someone who'd crossed lines they couldn't uncross. $1 million, she said, opening the case to reveal bundled cash that smelled like desperation and banking regulations violations. Take it. Sell me the bridge. Move somewhere far away and forget this ever happened. I looked at the money, then at her face. Cordelia, where does an HOA president get $1 million in cash? Her silence confirmed what we'd suspected. She'd raided every account, liquidated every asset, committed every financial crime necessary to buy her way out of consequences. Keep your money, I said quietly. Use it to hire the best criminal defense attorney you can find. After tonight's meeting, you're going to need one. The reckoning was 12 hours away. Friday night arrived with the weight of Judgment Day. Murphy's Tavern had never seen anything like it. Cars packed every available space, the gravel lot, the highway shoulder, even the creek access road for half a mile in both directions. The smell of diesel exhaust mixed with nervous sweat and the kind of anticipation that comes before public executions. People had driven from 3 counties to witness what everyone was calling the reckoning at Willow Creek. Inside, the tavern hummed with electric tension. Pristine Meadows residents sat stiffly among local ranchers who'd been watching this drama unfold with increasing entertainment. The ancient air conditioning wheezed against the crowd, and windows fogged with breath and barely contained anger. Rita had done her homework perfectly. Over the past week, she'd contacted 67 homeowners directly, sharing just enough financial information to get their attention without revealing our full arsenal. The result was a community at war with itself. Cordelia's shrinking circle of loyalists versus residents demanding accountability for their missing millions. Cordelia arrived precisely at 7, flanked by 2 attorneys who looked like they billed more per hour than most people earned in a week. She transformed her usual power suit image into something more sympathetic. A conservative dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension, but projected appropriate humility for someone facing community judgment. The psychological shift was masterful. Gone was the imperious HOA president who'd threatened lawsuits and hired mercenaries. In her place sat a woman who appeared fragile, almost victimized by circumstances beyond her control. If I hadn't seen the explosive charges and the $1 million bribery attempt, I might have been fooled. "Friends," Father Miguel began, his voice carrying 40 years of moral authority, "we gather tonight because trust has been broken. We're here to seek truth, demand accountability, and hopefully find a path forward that serves justice and community healing." The crowd settled into expectant silence, broken only by creaking chairs and the distant rumble of evening traffic crossing my bridge, a sound that reminded everyone exactly what this dispute was really about. Maggie rose first, her prosecutor's training evident in how she commanded attention without dramatics. "Before we discuss tolls or property rights, we need to address a fundamental betrayal of trust. Where did $2.3 million disappear to?" She'd prepared a presentation worthy of federal court. Bank records, contractor invoices, expense reports, and timeline charts that painted an unmistakable picture of systematic fraud. But it wasn't the numbers that hit hardest. It was the personal details that made abstract theft feel intimate and cruel. "Mrs. Patterson," Maggie said, addressing an elderly woman in the front row, "you've lived on a fixed income since your husband died, scraping together HOA dues every month because you believed the money was building community infrastructure. Would you like to know how much your HOA president spent on imported Italian marble for her personal garden walkway?" The number, $47,000, hit the room like a physical blow. Mrs. Patterson's gasp was audible, and murmurs of outrage rippled through the crowd like waves. "Mr. Bradley," Maggie continued, turning to the retired teacher, "you volunteered hundreds of hours organizing community fundraisers for bridge construction. Would you like to see receipts for the wine cellar that cost more than your annual pension?" Each revelation was a calculated precision strike. These weren't abstract financial crimes. They were personal betrayals of neighbors who'd trusted their community leader to protect their interests and their futures. But Cordelia's response surprised everyone. She stood abruptly, cutting off her lawyer's whispered warnings, and faced the crowd with something approaching defiance. "Everything I did was legal," she declared, her voice stronger than expected. "Every expenditure was voted on by the board, properly documented, and approved through official channels." "Legal doesn't mean ethical," Father Miguel observed quietly. "And it doesn't mean honest," Rita added from the back of the room, her accountant's precision cutting through the legal smokescreen. "You told these people their money was building a bridge. Instead, you built yourself a luxury lifestyle." That's when Cordelia played her final card, one I hadn't seen coming. "You want to talk about honesty?" she said, her voice rising with desperate anger. "Let's talk about Rex Donovan's extortion scheme. Let's discuss how he's held this entire community hostage, charging illegal tolls, threatening to destroy our property values, making our lives miserable because he can't accept that the world has moved beyond his grandfather's time." She turned to face me directly, and for the first time in months, I saw the real Cordelia. Not the polished HOA president or the desperate criminal, but a woman who genuinely believed she was fighting for progress against backward rural stubbornness. "This man has terrorized our community," she continued, gaining momentum from the crowd's shifting attention. "He's cost us hundreds of thousands in legal fees, destroyed our peace of mind, and threatens our property values every single day he operates that illegal toll booth." The room buzzed with confused murmurs. Some residents nodded agreement. They'd been hearing Cordelia's version of events for months. Others looked skeptical, remembering the financial evidence they'd just witnessed. I stood slowly, feeling every eye in the room focus on me. Time to end this properly. I stood slowly, feeling every eye in Murphy's Tavern focus on me like spotlights. The weight of the moment settled on my shoulders. Not just my reputation, but the future of an entire community hung on what I said next. Cordelia's right about one thing, I began, my voice carrying clearly in the dead silence. I have been charging tolls on my bridge, $5 per crossing, exact change only, clearly posted signage. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some Pristine Meadows residents nodded as if this admission proved Cordelia's accusations. But let me tell you what she's not telling you, I continued, pulling out my phone and connecting it to the tavern's sound system. About 3 weeks ago, Mrs. Whitmore visited my bridge with an interesting proposition. The audio quality was crystal clear. Modern phones record better than most people realize. Cordelia's voice filled the room, offering me $1 million in cash to disappear and forget this ever happened. The crowd's gasp was audible when they heard her admit to having access to that much liquid cash from HOA accounts. That recording was made yesterday morning, I said as shocked silence settled over the room. After someone placed professional explosives on my bridge supports, designed to destroy the evidence of everything that's happened here. Sheriff Morrison stepped forward from his position by the door, his expression grim. Ladies and gentlemen, I can confirm that we removed military-grade explosive charges from Mr. Donovan's bridge yesterday evening. The investigation is ongoing, but I think you deserve to know the stakes we're dealing with. The transformation in the room was immediate. Residents who'd been nodding along with Cordelia's accusations now stared at her with horror. Attempted murder changes how people view property disputes. But Cordelia wasn't finished. Her lawyers were frantically whispering warnings, but desperation had taken over from legal caution. "He's lying!" she screamed, loud enough to make glasses rattle on nearby tables. "That recording is fake. Those explosives were probably planted by him to frame me. This whole thing is a conspiracy to steal community property." That's when Tom Bradley, the retired teacher, stood up from his chair near the front. At 73, he commanded respect from everyone in the room, the kind of moral authority that comes from 40 years of teaching other people's children. "Cordelia," he said quietly, "I helped organize the fundraising committee for bridge construction. I personally handed you checks totaling $47,000 from community bake sales, car washes, and volunteer events. Where did that money go?" The question hit like a sledgehammer. These weren't abstract financial crimes anymore. This was neighbor stealing from neighbor, community leader betraying the people who'd trusted her with their children's fundraising efforts. Cordelia's face crumpled as the weight of specific accusations replaced general denials. "Tom, you don't understand the complexity of municipal financing?" "I understand theft," he interrupted, his teacher's voice cutting through her excuses like chalk on a blackboard. "I understand lying to people who trusted you. I understand using community money for personal luxury while forcing us to depend on someone else's private property for basic access to our homes." That's when Father Miguel stood, and the room fell into the kind of respectful silence reserved for moments of moral reckoning. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, his voice carrying the weight of pastoral authority, "this community gave you our trust, our money, and our faith in shared governance. In return, you've given us lies, theft, and now attempted violence. Is there anything you'd like to say to these people you've betrayed?" The question hung in the air like incense, heavy with the promise of redemption if she chose honesty, or damnation if she continued down the path of denial. Cordelia looked around the room, at faces that had once supported her, neighbors who'd believed in her leadership, friends who'd trusted her with their community's future. I watched her realize that there was no legal maneuver, no procedural trick, no amount of money that could undo the trust she'd shattered. "I never meant for it to go this far," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the tavern's ventilation system. "The wine cellar was supposed to increase property values. The landscaping was meant to attract new residents. Everything I did was for the community's benefit." "Using community money without community consent," Rita observed from the back of the room. "While lying about bridge construction," Maggie added, "and ultimately resorting to explosives and bribery," Sheriff Morrison concluded. The room buzzed with angry conversations as neighbors turned to each other, processing the full scope of betrayal. Some residents were crying, whether from anger, disappointment, or relief that the truth was finally exposed, I couldn't tell. That's when I played my final card. "Folks," I said, raising my voice over the crowd noise, "we can spend all night talking about what went wrong, or we can start talking about how to fix it. I've got a proposal that protects everyone's interests. innocent residents, community finances, and property rights. I pulled out the bridge sharing agreement Maggie had drafted, along with Buck's engineering assessment for community bridge construction. Option 1, we formalize a bridge sharing arrangement. $200 monthly maintenance fee split among all residents. That's $1 per household per month. I maintain the bridge. You get guaranteed access. Everyone wins. Option 2, the community builds its own bridge. Buck Morrison's done the engineering. Total cost $180,000. Construction time 6 weeks. You'd have complete control over your own infrastructure. Option 3, I continued, looking directly at Cordelia. We let law enforcement handle the criminal charges while the community decides its own future, without interference, from people who've proven they can't be trusted. The vote wasn't even close. 200 hands raised for option 1, community cooperation over continued conflict. As Sheriff Morrison approached Cordelia with handcuffs, she turned to me one last time. You won, she said simply. No, I replied. We all won. That's what community means. 6 months later, I was standing on my grandfather's bridge at sunrise, watching steam rise from my coffee mug while the mountains caught fire with golden light. And for the first time in years, everything felt exactly right. The changes started before Cordelia's handcuffs had stopped clicking. Within hours of her arrest, residents were organizing cleanup committees, financial oversight groups, and transparency initiatives that would have made government accountability advocates weep with joy. People who'd been strangers behind their gates suddenly became neighbors with shared purpose. Cordelia got 7 years federal prison for embezzlement and conspiracy, plus restitution requirements that would keep her broke until retirement. Her Seattle properties were seized to compensate the community, adding $1.8 million to the HOA recovery fund. Justice served cold, with a side of financial consequences. The new HOA board transformed Pristine Meadows overnight. Tom Bradley brought teacher's wisdom to the presidency, patient, thorough, and allergic to bullshit. Sarah Martinez applied nurse-level attention to detail to community finances, creating transparency systems so robust that every resident could track HOA spending in real time. Rita Rowan implemented accounting practices that would have impressed federal auditors. The bridge sharing agreement worked like clockwork. $200 monthly for maintenance, paid cheerfully by residents who'd learned the hard way that infrastructure doesn't maintain itself. I upgraded the bridge with safety lighting, historical markers, and railings carved with my grandfather's original designs. The structure was stronger and more beautiful than ever, carrying both vehicles and the weight of community redemption. But the real magic happened in the relationships. Morning joggers started stopping to chat instead of hurrying past. Parents brought children to learn about engineering and local history, their questions filling the air like birdsong. Several families invited me for dinner. Turns out good people had been hiding behind those mansion facades, just waiting for leadership that brought out their better angels instead of their worst fears. The story went viral faster than gossip at a church social. National media loved the narrative of combat engineer defeating HOA corruption through documentation and determination. But the real impact came from ordinary people facing similar battles who reached out for advice, strategies, and hope. That's when Father Miguel planted the seed that changed everything. Rex, you've got hard-won knowledge that could help thousands of people. Maybe it's time to turn this experience into a mission. I launched a YouTube channel teaching people how to research HOA finances, document harassment, and use legal leverage to protect their property rights. The response was overwhelming. Turns out America is full of people trapped by corrupt community leaders who mistake legal degrees for licenses to steal and intimidate. Within a year, the channel had grown to 400,000 subscribers. More importantly, it connected me with lawyers, engineers, and activists fighting similar battles nationwide. We created a network sharing strategies, legal precedents, and resources that helped ordinary people defeat extraordinary corruption. The most rewarding part wasn't the subscriber count, it was the victory letters. Handwritten notes from families who'd exposed fraud using our documentation techniques. Email updates from communities that had recovered stolen funds and rebuilt trust. Photos of new bridges, playgrounds, and community centers built with money that corrupt boards had tried to steal. 2 years after the confrontation at Murphy's Tavern, Pristine Meadows held its second annual Bridge Festival. The event had grown from community healing into regional celebration, attracting families from 3 counties who came to enjoy music, food, and the rare sight of government actually serving people instead of screwing them. I stood on my bridge that evening, watching children splash in the creek while their parents shared stories and laughter, and felt my grandfather's presence in the solid timber beneath my feet. He'd built this bridge to connect communities, and it had done exactly that, just not in ways anyone could have predicted. The festival raised $32,000 for veteran education scholarships, because sometimes the best way to honor the past is to build a better future, one young engineer at a time. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky the color of justice served, I pulled out my phone for one final message to my growing family of property rights warriors. Remember, folks, you don't have to take abuse from petty tyrants hiding behind HOA bylaws. Document everything, know your rights, and never let anyone steal what your family built. Share your HOA horror stories in the comments, and don't forget to check out our friends at Karen's Stories for more tales of entitled neighbors getting their comeuppance. Subscribe for common sense solutions to uncommon corruption. Until next time, this is Rex Donovan reminding you that sometimes the best way to build bridges is to be willing to close them first. The creek gurgled its approval, and somewhere in the distance a loon called across water that reflected stars and possibilities.